9 months. That's how long it took to build a single chip that OpenAI now says runs AI at roughly half the cost of the hardware the entire industry has been forced to depend on. It changed hands at 7:54 on a Wednesday morning, in a California conference room, passed from Broadcom's CEO straight to Sam Altman. One small piece of silicon, and the most valuable company on Earth suddenly has a problem it cannot simply buy its way out of. Here's why that quiet handoff matters more than any headline you saw this week. Start with the framework, because the headlines keep missing it. Every AI product you touch runs on two things: the model and the chip underneath it. For 3 years the model layer got all the attention. But the real choke point was never the software. It was supply. Who makes the chips, what they charge, and whether any buyer can credibly say no. On Wednesday that balance moved. Here's the demand side, and it's staggering. The world cannot buy AI chips fast enough. Nvidia's full-year revenue is on track to top $358 billion this year, up from under $27 billion just 4 years ago. When one supplier sells everything it can make and sets its own price, that's not a market, that's a toll booth. And every AI lab on Earth has been paying the toll. Now rewind to the part nobody screenshots. Back in October, OpenAI and Broadcom signed a multi-year deal to build 10 gigawatts of custom AI chips, roughly enough power to light up a small country. At the time it read like a routine press release, and most people scrolled right past it. What they missed was a clock starting, and a small team racing against the one company that controls the entire supply, and the speed is the part that should genuinely stop you. From first design to manufacturing tape-out, the chip, they named it Jalapeno, was built in just 9 months. Engineers who do this for a living call that close to the fastest custom chip cycle ever pulled off in advanced semiconductors. Projects like this normally take years. 9 months is not an engineering update. It's a statement, aimed at exactly one address. So how do you compress years into months? OpenAI used its own AI models to help design the chip. Let that land for a second. The software wrote part of the hardware that will go on to run the software. That feedback loop is the quiet engine of this entire era. And it's precisely why incumbents who still move at human speed should be paying very close attention. But here's a real limit, because accuracy matters more than hype. Jalapeno isn't built to train models. It's built for inference, the everyday work of answering your questions, writing your code, generating your images. That's the high volume, never sleeps part of the business. It's also where the bills pile up fastest. When there, and you change the economics of every single AI product on the market. Think about it as supply and demand again. Training a model happens occasionally. Inference happens billions of times a day, forever. If you run a service used by hundreds of millions of people, your inference bill isn't a line item, it's the whole game. Whoever owns the cheapest inference chip owns the margins of the entire industry. And until Wednesday morning, that owner had no real competition. So here's where the threads collide. In early testing, OpenAI says Jalapeno delivers better performance per watt than today's best chips, and runs at roughly half the cost of a typical AI GPU. Cut the price of inference in half, and you don't just trim a budget. You reset the cost of intelligence itself, for everyone. Suddenly Nvidia's toll booth has a detour. Nvidia, to be clear, isn't losing its crown tomorrow. Training still runs almost entirely on its hardware, and demand is still insane. But pricing power is a fragile thing. The moment a serious buyer can credibly walk away, or even just threaten to, the seller's leverage starts to crack. OpenAI just became that buyer. And the chip itself just became a negotiating weapon. And this isn't happening in isolation. That's the collision the title points to. Google builds its own chips. Amazon builds its own chips. Reports say Meta is rolling out its own AI silicon too. One by one, Nvidia's biggest customers are quietly turning into Nvidia's competitors. When your top buyers start manufacturing the very thing you sell them, the trend line only points in one direction. Zoom out and you can see the real strategy. OpenAI doesn't want to rent the stack anymore. It wants to own it, chip architecture, memory, networking, scheduling, all the way up to the app on your phone. That's the Apple playbook. Control the silicon, control the experience, control the margin. The company that began life as a research lab is quietly turning itself into a hardware company. Now feel the scale of what's riding on this. OpenAI is one of the most valuable private companies ever built, and it's openly preparing for the public markets. So this chip isn't a hobby. It's a message to investors. We are not a tenant in someone else's data center. We are pouring the foundation ourselves. For a company about to ask Wall Street for an extraordinary act of faith, that story is everything. And here's where the ripple reaches you. Every time the cost of inference drops, AI gets cheaper to give away. Cheaper inference means free tiers get smarter, paid tiers get cheaper. And tools once locked behind expensive enterprise contracts start leaking down to ordinary users. A 50% cost cut at the chip level does not stay at the chip level. It flows downhill, straight to the price you pay. But let's stay honest, because hype is the enemy here. A chip in a conference room is not a chip in a data center. Real deployment isn't expected until the end of this year, ramping through next year, and into 2028. Broadcom's own leadership says full scale is still years away. Promising silicon has died on the road to mass production before. This is a starting gun, not a finish line, which is exactly why the market's reaction was so telling. Broadcom shares ticked up only 1 to 2% on the news, a shrug not a stampede. Wall Street has heard the phrase, Nvidia killer before, and it has learned to wait for proof. The smart money isn't betting the threat is already real. It's betting on whether OpenAI can actually manufacture at scale. That answer is still months away, so step back and breathe. What actually happened on Wednesday morning wasn't one product launch. It was the moment the biggest software name in AI reached down and grabbed the one layer it never controlled. The chip. The bottleneck. The toll booth. For the first time, the company that needed Nvidia the most showed the world that it might not need Nvidia forever. Bring it back to where we started: supply, demand, and power. For years the power sat with whoever controlled the scarce thing. Today that scarce thing is starting to have alternatives, and alternatives are what eventually break monopolies. Not overnight, not cleanly, but inevitably. The most important AI story this week wasn't a smarter model. It was a cheaper chip. Now you can see what that handoff in the conference room really was. A piece of silicon called jalapeno, built in 9 months, that OpenAI says runs AI at roughly half the cost, placed in the hands of the man whose company has spent years paying someone else's price. That's the one decision behind every headline this week. The day OpenAI stopped renting the future and started building it. Got an angle I missed? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe if you want me to keep digging into this stuff.